You're welcome along to the Keith Andrews Show every Thursday from 12:30 until 1:30. We mentioned a few weeks ago we're going to have regular guests on the show, and one of them I'm delighted to announce has managed to come in today, straight from the Aviva for a little bit of a launch there. Liam Mackey from the Irish Examiner. Liam, thanks very much for coming in.
Not at all, a pleasure, Keith.
How this morning go?
Grand, yeah. It was what used to be TV3 is now Virgin, launching their autumn schedule, I guess, or their new schedule, and this morning the focus was on the football.
Niall Quinn, Graham Souness.
Graham Souness.
Back in the
he is, yeah, and Niall's always a good talker. Niall, the thing interesting about Niall, from a journalist point of view, is he's seen the game from virtually every side.
Obviously been the chairman at Sunderland.
Well, that's the thing. So he kind of understands the business of football. He understands players. He understands club football. He understands international football. He understands all those tensions that arise. I always think he's a very articulate, clear-sighted guy. I know really a lot of time for him.
He's a nice fella as well, doesn't he?
He does. He is a nice fella. Yeah, he doesn't. I know for a fact from interviewing him over the years, he doesn't like the old Mother Teresa tag. You know, like he would say, "I'm not that nice." You know, there's a bit of devilment to him too. And he'd always say, "I was the biggest rogue of them all." It's just I was smarter.
Yeah.
And I remember him telling me a story one time, which was on the record. I'm not telling tales out of school. He was saying, you know, when the lads be going out for a few drinks, when Jack would give them a little bit of leeway, but of course they'd push it, you know. And so the lads would come back in maybe after the midnight curfew, and Jack would be sitting in the lobby of the old airport hotel, and they were caught, you know. And Quinn said, "Well, I just worked out you didn't come back till after 2.
Jack was gone to bed.
Jack said Mick Byrne, they were all gone to bed. He said, "I got away with it."
If you're going to break a curfew, don't break it by half an hour.
Smash it.
Go right through it.
Yeah. But no, he's a smart guy and a good guy now. Yeah. So he was there, and Graham Souness, and the usual. So apart from your good self, he'll be there, I gather. Yeah.
Busy. But listen, we'll have a little look at what's coming up on today's show. We've got Martin O'Neill chat. Liam sat down with him last week at the AGM down in Cork with the FAI. Manchester United, we're going to touch on those. José Mourinho, still a little bit under pressure. Lots of things happening there. Harry Arthur, making his debut for Cardiff City last weekend. Only good news for Ireland fans, in my opinion. Irish players abroad, some of the ones that are doing particularly well, and a little bit of a championship update. So last week you went down a couple of days to the AGM down in Cork. So it's been hard. I wasn't aware of this. It's been quite hard at times to get Martin one-on-one. Yeah, well, I mean, I'd say, to be fair to him, it's been like that for a number of years and over a number of managers, actually. Yeah, it has. I mean, if I go back to when I was sort of coming on board first on the football beat, I'd been in journalism for years, but full-time on the football beat would have been just after Italian 90. And obviously that was the height of the Jack era and so on. I remember interviewing Jack for Hot Press magazine, actually, when even before I got working for the national papers. And you get the odd one-on-one with Jack, but subsequent to that, things have just become much more controlled, and you'd have experienced this yourself. And partly I think it's to do with the vastly increased number of media people who now have to be accommodated. And also I just think a general increase in clubs and international federations exercising control over media access and essentially trying to massage the story, if you like, to an extent. When did you notice a change in that? Was it social media aspect?
No, I'll tell you, it would have been in terms of the Irish management. I remember being sitting down and doing one-on-one with Brian Kerr, and I know he would have done that with a few people. And then I remember at the start of Steve Staunton's reign, I remember at the very beginning sitting down with Stephen and doing a one-on-one, and because we obviously knew him as a player as well. So, and then it changed at a certain point. And partly, look, I think, you know, managers, it's human nature. They're going to be far less inclined to want to sit down and bare their soul with a journalist of all people if things aren't going well. And obviously things didn't go well for Stephen, and he was under enormous pressure. And I think the media, to my mind, a lot of the criticism in terms of the performances and the results, obviously there were some infamously awful results. The criticism from the football point of view justified. I think there was a kind of a crucifixion of someone like Steve Staunton, which to me was wrong, because as I look back now, you know, what an amazing figure in Irish football history, and yet he ended up as the Muppet.
Sad, isn't it?
It was, you know, he was a guy.
Right, we held him in such highest regard as a player and a person.
but still
you would have interviewed him as a player, and I presume he was.
Yeah, but still should, and I would still hold him in high esteem for all that. And that's not denying that. Look, his management thing just didn't work. It failed, and it was a gamble, you know. And obviously the whole plan was Brian Robson would be there with the wisdom, and Stephen would be there with the kind of, as a management terms, youthful vigour and passion. Didn't happen. So look, I think, you know, as often happens, if results aren't going well and a team is struggling, then that dictates the mood, the media mood. The RT panel was a big role in dictating the national mood, and the fans make up their own mind. And I think subsequent to that, I was kind of aware that there was more of a kind of a control being exercised over media access, and that's across the board. I mean, the same thing has happened with clubs in England. I go back to, again, when I was starting out, I would have had the phone numbers of virtually every member of Jack's squad, virtually every member. Yeah, and you know, you didn't abuse it. Access was like, I mean, compared to you from your time with the Irish squad, I remember you'd just go out to Lansdowne Road where they used to train the day before a game or whatever, and as they were coming off the training pitch, I'd approach guys. I'd approach Andy Townsend. I was working for a Sunday paper at the time, so I was always looking for something, you know, like one-on-ones ideally. And 9 times out of 10, the guys go, I'll see me back at the hotel.
About 15, 20 minutes.
The only problem is you'd go back to the hotel and then you'd be sitting in the lobby and they'd come down and go, geez, I have to go for lunch, you know. But they would eventually do it, and you could get all these.
So how difficult was that then, when it did start to change?
Well, you kind of to some extent you just go with the flow. I mean, it's much more controlled. It's much more press conferences, briefings, media schedule. I don't think the FAI are unique in this. I think that is the way it is.
It's across the board. And you're right, club levels in England, it's the in-house television.
And you mentioned social media. I mean, that clearly has come into it. Suddenly, you can, if you like, cut out the middleman. I mean, there are a lot of people in football who've no time for the media until they end up working in it, and then they've loads of time for it. But while they're footballers, they don't. And suddenly, social media offers you, you know, you have Twitter, you can speak directly to the fans, and all that has changed the thing. So to bring it back to what you asked me originally, it was the first time, I think, really most of the daily newspaper correspondents, there'd be a handful of us, had a chance to sit down and do some kind of in-depth within the time allowance, one-on-one with Martin, and it was an interesting experience for a number of reasons. Principally, I think just the contrast in his mood between since the winter of discontent, which lingered, as we know, for quite a while after Denmark, and sense.
Obviously, the Stoke link in January.
Well, he spoke about that. I mean, he said it to me, and he said it to other people, that it had just gotten to a stage where he thought maybe it was time to do something different. And the Denmark thing, he said, I'm someone who broods, that's my nature. And he was clearly bruised by it. He was clearly taken aback by the criticism. And what he said to me, he said, look, on the one hand, if you're a manager, you know, it's going to come with the territory. But he clearly, I think what galled him and what he suggested to me was that it was as if, he said, Euro 2016 never happened. It was as if beating Wales
I think though in this day and age, though,
happened.
Liam, that, you know, we're all big boys at this stage, and he's in an environment where you're going to receive criticism if it doesn't go to plan, and you're only as good as your last game to a degree. It's a common used term and phrase in football. We move on, and then I have to bring it back to it. Look, we all know the way it ended. I was quite critical of the performance against Denmark, but if you go towards January around that Stoke time, that didn't sit well at all with me. It really didn't, because what I was doing was I was putting myself as a player into that environment. I'm thinking, we're going through a really testing time here. Is my manager in this with me or not? You know, because if I was a player in January, you know, there's obviously the transfer window open. You hear about Daryl Horgan, we had on the show last week, craving first team action to put themselves in a position to play. Alan Judge in a similar position now at Brentford. Is he playing enough? It's all in the back of their minds to get them in the best possible position to play for Ireland. January didn't sit well with me. We can push to one side to a degree, the Turkish friendlies, end the season games. But I think what you're alluding to maybe is there's a different vibe often.
There's a completely different vibe. And look, you know, someone who's talking to the media, it's one thing. You know, talking a good game is one thing. And you know as well as I do, what happens on the training pitch, and most of all what's going to happen in games, will dictate the mood again, his mood, the player's mood, the national mood. But I have to say, there was a genuine sense came across, and I think my colleagues who did their own interviews with him, a genuine sense came across of someone who kind of had got their mojo back. really clearly. I mean, I mentioned in the piece I wrote for the Examiner, barely 5 minutes into the interview with me, he was actually pushing back his chair and on his feet and giving me there's not much use to Irish football, but giving me like an impromptu sort of a little mini training seminar on you know, his phrase how to deal better with the ball. So he's a big thing about keeping possession better, being more composed and constructive, which of course, as you well know, is an interesting thing for him to talk about, given that there might be a perception that that's not the kind of football he wants Ireland to play. But anyway, he was definitely upbeat. If he was deflated back in December all the way through to March, as you say, this time he was upbeat, he was positive, he was committed. He said ultimately what decided him against the Stoke job, this is his view, was just, can I allow 5-1 Denmark in Dublin to be my last act as Ireland manager, and he just decided he couldn't. So again, look, what unfolds over the coming months will tell obviously the full tale.
But it is positive signs though, and because players pick up on that so sharpish. This they really do. Is he in? I mentioned, is he in it? Is he not? This will have got back to the players. So there is an energy now around it going into the squad gets announced on Monday.
It does, and I think that's vital. You know, now there is a problem which he's inevitably going to face, and there's simply no way around this. That because of the Nations League draw, we're going to have Denmark, we're going to have Wales. I mean, it's all going to come back again. Look, such is life. You know, he's going to be asked again, and that'll probably be hugely irritating when he's at a stage now where he's finally trying to turn the page. You know, but you know, I got a sense talking to him. And no more than a sense, and I'm not trying to read anything more into this than a manager doing this interview with a journalist. But I got a little sense of this is what players who rave about his infectious enthusiasm, his motivation quality. Just upbeat, buzzing. Like, you were looking at this guy, he's 66. He was like a footballer. He was like someone.
You mentioned in your piece as well that he doesn't want to be the constant voice on the training ground. He wants to remain, so on match day he has that impact. But he also mentioned, which I picked out, which I thought was really, really important, it's essential we master certain things if we're going to improve. Now, the hand that he's got to play, we all know about maybe lack of creativity, goals, etc., that end of the pitch. He spoke about we have to keep possession better. I think, and I've mentioned this before, that what he's got and what he's got to do, what he's got at his disposal and what he's got to do tactically, he has to give the players better ideas because they are used to getting that now at club level. It's not like when he was managing Leicester, when he was managing Celtic. They're a different breed of players that need detail. So that detail that he was giving you, they need that on obviously a grander scale.
I mean, it was. I found it kind of interesting thing to hear him say that he was saying this is, because I said to him, look, you're talking about being better in possession. You're talking about being more composed and constructive. Like, can you affect that on the training pitch? Because you're dealing with established pros, as you say, who are doing it, some of them for their clubs and to a greater or lesser extent. And his thing is, and this is what he was trying to demonstrate just to me, just give an example. And it seemed on one level, this is a fairly basic thing to be instructing a senior pro about, but he clearly feels it was an example of what he can do. And he was talking about small things. He was talking about receiving the ball, turning as you receive it, having a little look over your shoulder, getting the picture in your head. He was talking about the wide players having options. I mean, I think, and I don't know whether you agree or not, one of the more dispiriting things about watching Ireland play, and to be fair, it isn't only just under Martin O'Neill, when it's kind of at its most basic and uninspiring, it's the ball just hoofed up the channel. And you see that so often, and then you see teams coming to Dublin, and often much lesser teams than us in the greater scheme of things, teams that we beat. But you see them playing triangles out near the corner flag, and they come away with the ball, and you think, why don't we do that?
Why can't we do that? How can
he was talking about that, and he was saying, look, he grabbed a piece of paper, having given me the physical demonstration. He grabbed a piece of hotel stationery that just happened to be on the table in front of us, and he drew half a pitch, and he inscribed really heavy emphasis. He said, this is the wide position, and he said, this is a position I know well, right? So he was talking about options, alternatives, players shown, things you can do. You play 1-2s, you go around the back, you whip
That's
it in.
That's a sign of a good team, though, and I think this is the detail that the players do need.
Okay.
We got heavily criticised under Trapp's reign for a basic form of football. I would suggest a 4-4-2. But we knew what we were doing. We really knew what we were doing. I don't think the same can be said about this team between chopping and changing personnel, maybe tweaking the system. And you're right. When take him as an example, a right winger. As he's coming inside, he should have a centre forward on a pivot as an angle.
Or
he should
an
have
overlapping
fullback or an underlapping fullback or whatever it is. But these are the type of phases of play that should be going on meticulously on a training ground. Like you look to the north, they've got the same amount of time on the training ground. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They have lesser players, but they're better drilled. Whereas I think he still coaches and manages in a way that he did 10 to 15 years ago. And his quirkiness, his man management, I don't doubt. But I do think the game has changed, and the players, what they need, are different.
Well, one of the things I find kind of fascinating about O'Neill's era is that on the one hand, there have been games in which we've struggled against probably inferior opposition, and the football has been basic, and we've been sloppy in possession, we've gone long, and all that sort of stuff, and the kind of stuff that people get really riled about. And yet, this is the same manager in whose reign we've had not just good results, but some of the best results in Irish football history. I mean, genuinely, like seismic things, beating Germany at home. Austria away was the biggest away result since we beat Scotland under Jack in 1987 in terms of ranking and stuff like that. Beating Wales away, the Bosnia playoff. You can look at these extraordinary performances, and I don't think you can say, well, that was just a night when the players did it. Like, clearly the manager is setting things up right to get those kind of results, whatever else happens. The other interesting thing that he raised in the course of the interview with me, and I'd be interested in your opinion on this, because you've been through qualification and you've been to a tournament, admittedly an unhappy tournament experience, but he said two totally different beasts, right? And his line was, qualification is a grind, and you get the results whatever way you can. He said, tournaments, you go there, there's a sense, first of all, that you deserve to be there. Yeah. So there's an automatic confidence, there's the whole buzz around it. There's the different dynamic of playing games like that close together. Yeah. Everyone's on neutral grounds, apart from the host nation. And he said, the phrase, as you said, look, the shackles come off. He said, other teams will tend to stand off you a bit as well. It's just the nature of tournament football. It's not the dogfight that qualification games can be. And hence, in his view, why, and I think he's right, and we played some of the best quality football under O'Neill.
Yeah, we did.
At those finals. I think at the first half against Sweden, all of the Italy game, a lot of the French game, Belgium game obviously didn't. Yeah. So that's another aspect of it that he stressed.
And again, you mentioned the qualification, then he mentioned a couple of teams like Serbia where they have technically better players. I agree with that. I haven't got a problem with us being pragmatic in our approach, defence-minded. Because that quote that I took out, it's essentially we master things if we're going to improve. So for me, what I would be mastering with the squad available is we are hard to beat. We are hard to break down. We do not concede cheap goals because we know we're going to have to work extremely hard to score, because we haven't got Robbie Keane up front anymore. Goals are at a premium. Even going into these games in September, we're not going to have Sean Maguire, who was looking like he was getting up to a level. Then unfortunately he injured his hamstring. Scott Hogan not playing at the moment at Aston Villa. Shane Long on the periphery at Southampton. So look, it's not rocket science. We haven't got that at the moment. So it's even more important what we do the other end. So in these games, look, we all want in an ideal world those performances every time we play at the Aviva. It's not going to happen. And I can suck that up. Like the first leg against Denmark, I felt there was a lot of unnecessary criticism. I had no problem at all going away to Copenhagen, getting a 0-0, playing in that manner, no problems at all. And you're right, certain games throughout a qualification period, there's going to be times where you get criticised, it's a 0-0 away to whoever it is, we should be beating them. Yeah, maybe, but I think defence first, the foundations have to be right. And I think we've got solid athletic players that can play from that base and have a real energy going forward to counter-attack teams. Yeah,
I think though, and I suspect you agree, I mean, I think what I would love to see in the Irish team is the big results are great, and ultimately it is about results. If we qualify, everybody's happy. And if we'd having played 0-0 in Copenhagen, I did think, I have to say, that not getting an away goal was going to come back to haunt us. I really did. Yeah. Just given that they had Eriksen. Now I know we had a freakishly good night, and to some extent we had a freakishly bad night in Dublin, and O'Neill, to be fair to him, takes it on the chin that he made substitutions that left us physically weakened and exposed, and then they picked us off.
That was a gamble, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, and you can think, was he right to make the gamble when he did? Could he have hung on a bit longer? But look, it went against us. Like you, I don't think he can be defined by that result at all. But I would like to see, and I do. One worry I have gone into the next campaign is the absence of Wes Hoolahan, to be honest, because I think he personifies that stuff that Martin O'Neill says he wants to see more of. Composure on the ball, the ability to use it constructively and so on.
What I think he needs to do, though, Liam, is it's for me, with the personnel available, we don't know exactly who's going to be fit in a couple of weeks' time. I think he needs to tweak the midfield. So I think instead of going a 2 and a 1 with a number 10, a Wes type, because we haven't got him, is you go to one sitter and 2 box-to-box types that you're going to have to get more out of. So Harry Arthur, we're going to touch on a little bit later in the show, has that ability if he's told how to play it, what to do. And Jeff Hendrick, how do we get him back to playing the way he played
at the Euros?
So they're the conundrums that he has. That's the way I would base our midfield, with legs, energy, a willingness to get forward.
And would you see at the base of that midfield Declan Rice?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that
that's exactly where I was going to bring you next.
Yeah, it was one of the things. It follows logically from what we've been talking about. Again, quoting Martin O'Neill from my own interview. I mean, I asked him straight up, because it has been. I don't know that he had absolutely come down on one side or the other in terms of where he might deploy Declan Rice, whether it would be at the back or at the
still up in the air, isn't it?
Yeah, I have to say, in the interview I did with him, he came down pretty strongly on the midfield option, but
for the here and the now.
Yes, because he was saying, look, Glenn Whelan isn't getting any younger. I'm kind of paraphrasing what he said. McCarthy's out, Robbie Brady's still only on his way back, but to be fair, he was also impressed with Rice. I think a lot of people were in the spring and summer friendlies. What was interesting, of course, and the reason I specifically brought it up last week, because it was coming off the back of the first day of the Premier League season, and Rice had this pretty chastening experience for a fellow who's still only 19. So people would be, I'm sure, aware, but just for anyone who isn't, Pellegrini, new manager of West Ham, very experienced, decides, I'm going to put this boy into midfield at Anfield against Liverpool. Now, I wrote a piece saying, the whole West Ham team in that game went like lambs to the slaughter. But Declan Rice was the sacrificial lamb. He was the one.
You took the words out of my mouth. We were on here last week talking about it. Yeah. And I felt he took the easy way out, Pellegrini, because he was not helped from senior players around him. Jack Wilshere, Mark Noble. Yeah. Martin, I think, has spoken a little bit. Great learning curve for him. It's as difficult as it's going to get. Them in Man City going to those type of places. So for his development, brilliant. For West Ham, they need to develop him in years to come. Yeah. Unfortunately for us, we need it now. Yeah. And I still think he'll be a key cog in our wheel. Yeah, and I mean, like, I think it would be interesting to see. He was a guy now sort of garlanded with plaudits, certainly here, and to be fair, for his stuff last season as well. So highly thought of being hyped up to an extent, and I think that's also, like Martin O'Neill did say, let's not put too much pressure on this guy at this stage. But certainly he was probably the success story out of the games in Turkey and the US more than anyone else, or France. And I think it'll be interesting to see how does he respond to that, because it's a pretty high profile setback on the first day of the season in the Premier League at Liverpool. And left out of the squad last weekend. That's tough, and so it's a test of character for sure, and how he responds. But I have to say, Liam, from everything I hear from a couple of people that work at West Ham that have worked with him, Irish underage teams, I don't think it'll be a problem. No, it doesn't seem to be. The type of individual that will take it, learn from it, work hard in the training ground, go back and go again. And at times, I've found this before, and a lot of the Irish players have, when he comes over, because he will be in the squad, when he comes over and he's in this environment, it's a release, it's a break. And all right, you haven't played in 3-4 weeks for West Ham. Your last experience might have been taking off a half time at Anfield. Yeah. Come here, you're in. Oh, listen, you can see that with other people in the current squad. You would have seen it in your time, and it's ever thus. I mean, we might be talking about him in a while, but James McLean, I think, is a real example of a player who has struggles at different times and for different reasons in his clubs. In Ireland, a favourite son. Exactly. And what a difference. And it rebuilds the whole confidence around the player. I mean, it almost, for some of the players, I don't know if you would agree or have sensed this yourself, I sometimes get the impression that for players
who might be, for whatever reason, struggling at a club, there is a sense in which Ireland becomes the club for them, you know, has everything that they want in a club, that sense of camaraderie. That
stark contrast what we've seen from England down through the years. This summer a little bit different, the way Gareth Southgate has built that kind of environment, but it was polar opposites. You're right. The Ireland dressing room, the get-togethers was just like it's your comfort blanket in a way.
And I think that was always a huge factor in Ireland's success. You know, I'm not saying there weren't times when there was tension behind the scenes, and we know full well there were. You know, but I think as a general rule, there is that sense that everybody, when they come in, or most players, seem to be kind of elevated by the whole experience. And as you say, if you're having a particularly difficult time in England or wherever club you're at, it becomes a release and a relief.
We're going to move on to Manchester United, touch on that. Gary Breen and Dave McIntyre were on commentary duty at the weekend, and Gary Breen was certainly not too impressed.
Quality of his passing for a player of his ability has literally been woeful. We're talking about a player of sensational quality. He's got all the attributes. Captain of the team. He's got on the ball so many occasions. Just keeps hitting them out of play.
Well, this reflects very badly on the manager, this performance. His central defenders have been at sea pretty much from the kick-off. Paul Pogba and Fred have put in really average performances.
Dave, I'm 100% the manager is culpable for whatever team you put out. But there's been mistakes made here that I don't care how good a coach you are, I don't care how good a manager you are, you can't legislate for that. Not if you're playing and wearing the shirt of Manchester United.
There's a distinct lack of quality all over the pitch.
Yeah, there
from
is.
a Manchester United point of view.
You don't expect that from a team like Manchester United. But more worrying is the very fact they've been bullied this afternoon. And that's probably one of the worst things you can be said to you as a footballer, that you've been bullied by your opposition.
They've been bullied by his side. They were played off the pitch by Watford a week ago.
But if you were to digest this now with 10 minutes to go and see exactly where Manchester United are, they're unrecognisable from the shirts they're wearing. These are players who have come here for huge money. They are sorely lacking in the mental strength. Maybe have the technical ability, but they do not have the mental strength to play for Manchester United.
So Gary Breen not too impressed. Well, I don't think anybody was. It's not rocket science to suggest that. He was obviously at the game. Look, there's been a lot made about the centre-half pairings, and I've made this point before that Mourinho's signed two of the players, Boy and Lindelof. He's had Smalling, Jones, Rojo. When he arrived at the club, 5 centre-halves. All season long it's been, I've given him the shopping lists, I want these players, I want that player. He hasn't improved any of those players, in my opinion. He spent £364 million on 8 players. Alexis Sanchez has come in on a swap deal with Mkhitaryan on huge wages. Zlatan was a free transfer, but again, wages-wise was huge. The cohesion between Mourinho and the board, Ed Woodward, and the fans, the players, he's not winning on any front here. So it's a difficult time for him. Is it the third season syndrome? Well, I asked you before, and I didn't ask you for your answer before, so you're going to tell me now. What would you do if you were going to interview him currently?
Well, do you know what? I'd love the opportunity because whatever else you say about Mourinho, he is good copy. You know, purely from a media point of view, there's never a dull moment, and it might irritate the hell out of people, or it might excite them, or they might find it humor, but he's not dull. So just that's a pure media response. What I would do is, I was thinking about this just as an icebreaker, right? And this has nothing to do with Man United, nothing to do with what he's done in the past as a manager or what's happening to him now, but just to break the ice. It's always good to break the ice with an interviewee. I would mention to him an interesting story that relates to his family background in football that has an unusual Irish connection. And if you'll indulge me, I'll tell it, because I'm not sure how many people know about it. When I was a kid growing up, and I'm a very old man now, one of my boyhood hero, I was a Shamrock Rovers supporter, my boyhood hero was Mick Leach, who's famous Irish striker of the 60s and into the 70s. And subsequent, I went to Milltown and worshipped him as a kid, and then because of the nature of the job I've been in, got to know him and later on and occasionally meet up with him, and he's a tremendous fella, Mick, you know. And he told me a story some months back about a tournament, and by the way, there is a Mourinho point at the end of this, in case you think my age is getting to me and I've forgotten what I'm beginning with. He told me a story. Yeah. He did remind me. He told me a story about a tournament Ireland played in Brazil in 1972. It was a kind of a mini World Cup invitational tournament. And other countries included Portugal and I think Chile, Iran, okay? And it was that era when League of Ireland players were in Irish squads, as well as some of the guys who were playing across the way. Anyway, Mick, top striker at the time, he got picked. And this is by the way, but I do remember my excitement as a kid when, after the tournament ended, I discovered that the two strikers who were picked in the team of the tournament, which presumably was a 4-4-2, were Eusebio of Portugal and Mick Leach of Shamrock Rovers. So I was going around to all my mates who supported English clubs going, have you seen what it says in the Irish Independent or whatever? Anyway, so that I'd been long aware of that tournament and Mick's role. And as I said, some months ago, he told me this story. He'd been in Portugal, I guess, on holidays, and Portuguese friends produced a yellowing newspaper from 1972 and said, have you ever seen this? And showed it to him and translated it. And it was reports from that tournament. And Ireland played Portugal. And they said, here, look at the substitution. And so anyway, the explanation of what happened was, at half-time in this Ireland versus Portugal game, which Mick Leach played in and whoever else was picked for that particular team that day, Portugal made a substitution at half-time of their goalkeeper. And they brought on a goalie who played the second half, and that was his only ever appearance for Portugal. He played 45 minutes, it was only ever his cap. And his name was Mourinho, and he was José Mourinho's father.
Go away.
Right? And Mick had only discovered this in the last year or something. Yeah. So, to get back to, because I haven't forgotten, the first thing I would do with José Mourinho, if I could get him on my own, to break the ice, because I pretty much imagine whatever else Mourinho is, he's a football man. Let's, you can kind of lose sight of where he's come from Porto and all the success he's had. So I'd do that to break the ice, and then I'd get into the more difficult. then the interview would end. And I'd say, could I speak to you about what's currently going on at Old Trafford? Look, he's a strange...
Because we've seen it with Pep, not last season, the season before, Techi, and I would see, when I'm covering games on a Saturday over in England, certain... the reporters, the TV lads in particular, would be getting ready to go down and interview Pep and Mourinho. Nervous. Very, very nervous. And the one thing, even last weekend, I think Guardiola had it with a lady journalist from, I think it was beIN Sports. The usual 3-word answers or very one-sentence answers and put it back to you straight away. And look, I'm obviously very new to interviewing. And you get ready for your next one. You think he's going to take a minute or two. If that comes back to me straight away, so you have to be on your toes, don't you?
It's the famous, the famous Gordon Strachan one where a journalist said, "Quick word, Gordon," and he said, "Velocity." Silence. But listen, it's. Do you know what I have to say for the guys who do the sort of flash interviews, as they call them, the post-match TV interviews, and you'll often hear them getting flack for the question. That's a tough gig as a journalist. That's a tough gig because you're the first in with a manager who
emotions are high.
And look, if you're in the back of a defeat and you have the crowd baying and stuff, well, what are you going to say? You know, it is a tricky one.
One thing I would say on that, right, was on the pro license, it was on last year with the FAI. We did a media section. So obviously I was a lot more used to the media angle than a lot of the managers, coaches who were on the course, and we brought up the whole Guardiola because it was during that season. The Techi interviews, his answers back, and it was fairly unanimous within the lecture hall.
Old habits die hard, Keith.
That, what sort of question is that? What? And I was kind of saying, hang on a minute, because now I've seen it from both sides. This fella has a job to do. He has to ask questions. Some of the questions that I've heard are ridiculous, and I think at times you deserve to be called. If you ask me, I'm fully entitled to come back at you because it's not you just dictate this whole kind of environment. But equally, this fella has a job to do. He has to interview post match. But there was a real kind of, well, no, Well, it was.
To be honest, though, Keith, I think that's just a reflection of there's a sort of mutually exclusive agenda in those situations. You know, if you're a journalist doing your job, you're going to ask the hard questions. and you're obviously going to look for a response, and that makes for good TV, it makes for good copy. And if you're a manager, you're going to take the hump. It's like the manager is not thinking at that moment, well, I need to give the media what they want, not in the heightened emotion of a post-match thing. And to be fair as well, often the opposite applies. It's just dull cliches in those situations. It's too soon after a game. People haven't digested what's gone on. But it is a difficult one, and people respond differently. I'll just mention briefly, because Giovanni Trapattoni, who you played under for Ireland, I know there was a period he got a lot of criticism from the supporters, for example, for the style of football, and obviously Euro 2012, went badly wrong for us. Albeit I'll always think that was a particularly brutal group that we found ourselves in. But anyway, but I will say about him, and it's one of the things I do admire about him a lot, and he was a gentleman, I found, in his dealings with us, the media. He was very courteous and very gracious. And I remember a night when, after we lost 6-1 against Germany, and the next game was in the Faroe Islands, and there was a story coming out which appeared in the papers and seemed to be coming from authoritative sources, that he was gone as a manager on the back of this Germany result, and that it didn't matter. One quote from a source was, it didn't matter if Ireland won 10-0 in the Faroes, he was gone. And this was out on the morning of the day before the game in the Faroes, and it was a World Cup qualifier, and obviously everybody was hurting after Germany, and it was a bad atmosphere. But suddenly, this is all Trapp was being asked about. All he was being asked about is, are you gone? Do you know about this? Have you spoken to the FAI? Do you know what you're going to do? Is this the end game for you? And I was thinking to myself, geez, if that was Alex Ferguson, it would have been end of press conference. It would have, and you've heard this many times.
There's a little problem with you and Mike. We're just going to get that sorted. We're just going to go to the Ireland video. Just have a little look at that, and we'll sort that out.
No problem.
It'd been in my mind for best part of the summer, to be honest with you, and it was just trying to wait for the right opportunity. I wanted to try, and stay in the Premier League. That was quite important to me, but location as well for a long-term sort of move was important at that time. But more the window went on, and the way the market was, I knew Cardiff come about quite late, along with a couple other teams. But for just some reason, it just felt right to go to Cardiff. I made my mind up quite quickly after learning their interest. I think, being around the bush, most of the public and the pundits are writing us off this year and assuming we'll go down. And it was exactly the same when we got promoted with Bournemouth. So, I feel like I'll be able to add a good experience in that sense to the team, and I was really looking forward to it.
In with United for pre-match.
We're back. So right, go back to Trapp.
Sorry about apologies for my mic failure. I'm just a contrast.
In a different way.
And I only pick Alex Ferguson as someone with a short fuse, famously short fuse. But there's plenty of managers. But you've heard it, and I've heard it a million times, where a manager, not just in football, will just go, I'm here to talk about tomorrow's game. I'm not talking about anything else. Yeah. And it's a way of just getting. And he didn't. He was gracious and he spoke, and he, there was a little bit of whatever will be. Que sera. As it turned out, I think it was a 4-1 win in the Faroes, and he got a reprieve. We know it didn't end happily in the end for him, but it is that is a difficult area in terms of the media football nexus. The post-match thing or the pre-match thing, where there's major trouble brewing in the background, is some people handle it better than others. One thing about Mourinho, I sometimes wonder, there's a lot of stuff that's, I think, strategic in the way Mourinho talks to media, and I sometimes think
he was like that.
He was, but I think Mourinho sometimes speaking to the dressing rooms for the media, which I do find slightly odd.
And but the board, certainly.
Yeah, well, certainly the board at the moment. But there is a danger that if you overdo that, and it's a little bit like you were talking about, how would players have reacted to when Martin O'Neill and the Stoke link was coming up, and is he really committed? And it maybe has a deflating effect generally on certain players. I think there's other players who just get on with it, no matter who's in charge. They just get on with it, But in Mourinho's case, and given how kind of badly the season has started, I know they won one and lost one, the defeat of Brighton was just so bad on so many levels. You're kind of wondering, are they believing Mourinho when he says this is going to be a disaster? Oh my, he didn't say that, but this is going to be a troubled, challenging season. All the rest have bought, we haven't. Does that seep into the dressing room? Do they actually start believing that?
I think it does have a negative effect without a shadow of a doubt.
Or does he say something different in the dressing room? That's the thing.
Well, I think in his absolute pomp, which we would probably say was first time around at Chelsea, he was the master of it. And he was the master of creating that siege mentality. And I think most managers that I would have worked under, like the Pep Guardiola Man City documentary at the moment, there's one piece in episode 3 or 4, I can't particularly remember, where they lost to Wigan in the FA Cup. Real big surprise. Delph got sent off, and he said in the dressing room after the game, because they had full access to it, "I'm going to protect you out there as always to the media, but in here I am disappointed."
Okay.
And I think the managers I've worked for create that type of environment where, if at the first kind of hurdle you fall and you give that not quite performance that you should be given, I think if your manager comes out and he starts saying that in the press straight away, you're thinking, do me a favour, will you?
Yeah.
One game we've let you down. Look, if it keeps happening, then I think managers have every right to go, look, can't actually abide by that. We're going to talk about Stoke City in a little bit and James McLean, and I think that has happened last night with them as they've lost 3-0, ironically, to Wigan.
The one other thing I'd say, just it's not a particularly original observation, but it just seems to be the case, and maybe there's a sort of a lesson from history, a warning from history for Arsenal, but it's just, if you've got a club that is so embedded and entangled and wrapped up with and almost a personification of a manager in the way that Alex Ferguson was at Man United. I mean, to an exceptional extent, and the way Wenger was in his pomp at Arsenal. It's a hell of a job following that guy. Even when you bring in the serial winner, the guy who's guaranteed to deliver, you're rebuilding in a way that is root and branch from the foundations up virtually. And it's, I think it just shows you.
And media, they don't want to hear rebuilding.
No.
Rebuilding takes time.
No.
You knock your house down. It takes time to get the foundations in. You're not even thinking about kitchens and bathrooms yet. So Arsenal aren't going in looking at nice shiny kitchens at the moment. The foundations, I totally agree. But they don't want to hear that.
But it's particularly the case when it's a manager of the stature of a Ferguson or even a Wenger. And I know Wenger, Ferguson was able to finish on a high to an extent, and from Wenger wasn't. I appreciate that. But when you've got guys whose fingerprints are all over the club, nothing else happens at the club without that. That's a difficult thing to come.
That's what Jose came out with recently. He demoted himself in a way. I'm not manager anymore. He's gone with the more modern term. Look, I'm clearly a head coach. I wanted X, Y, and Z. I didn't really have a say in that. So, it's difficult.
I have to say, I may be old-fashioned, and in fact I know I am, but I still think there's a big argument for the manager making the decisions about who you buy. I'm not sure the director of football thing, I know it works and has worked well, but it's a model now.
It's a European model,
well, it's a model now that it's the kind of like everyone thinks they have to do it. It's the right way to go. But, again, it does sound like a slightly dinosaur point of view, but I look at the greatest managers in Premier League history, and they didn't have director of football.
It's the crease and all
whether
the
it's a Busby, Shankly, Clough, all the way through to Ferguson, Wenger, they call the shots.
We heard from Harry Arthur. He moved his appearances at Bournemouth, which is a little bit sad because he's come all the way through with them as part of that team that went through the divisions. Himself and Francis, Cook, Charlie Daniels, left back. At times, so he's moved to Cardiff, who we know have been promoted. At times when I've seen him play for Ireland and he's come from Bournemouth and the way they play, and if anybody hasn't seen Bournemouth play, it's in a very deliberate fashion. Keep the ball on the deck, play through the tours with a real structure, the way Eddie Howe likes to play, which is probably why he gets a lot of plaudits, certainly in England, because young English coach, playing in the right way, and the right way a lot of people see it. When he comes and plays for Ireland, I genuinely think he doesn't know what he's doing. He's like a fish out of water, because the point I was making about Martin earlier about the structure, the phases of play, he doesn't get that. So he's looking around, showing him places. So I thought, going to Cardiff, gamble, because the way Neil Warnock plays is very, very direct. The most direct team in the Championship last year. He's going to live off scraps. Watched the first 45 minutes in the lounge last week at Everton, watching the Cardiff game. I thought he was exceptional.
Right.
I really did.
Okay.
And I've already mentioned about our midfield going forward, about one holder, 2 box-to-box types. I think Harry Arter can certainly be that player. If he learns how to play in an Ireland shirt, what's going to endear him to Ireland fans is going to be what he showed in that 45 minutes that I seen. Look, he's always that far away, in my opinion, from getting booked, or possibly more, which he was at the weekend. So he has to curb that as he closes down. He has to get the brakes on at times. Yeah. But I think he could be a big player for us.
Well, there's no doubt his kind of Irish career today, partly for the reasons you say, but also partly just injury setbacks that were kind of recurring, it has been just completely stop-start. I mean, and the hopes that were there from at the beginning haven't been realised because he hasn't had a consistent run. And you might be right. Now, we were talking earlier about Martin wanting to see. I'm not suggesting Ireland are going to start playing through the thirds, as a pattern of play, but certainly he's good in possession as well, Arter. I mean, he's a good footballer. So if Ireland can get a bit more of that, as well as the dynamic qualities we know he has, which Warnock will certainly be encouraging at Cardiff, it would be great to see him. We need the again, and we mentioned with Wes Hoolahan gone, I think we've lost some kind of an X factor there. I really do. Yeah. I know
still hasn't got a club, to my knowledge.
It's Wes, I think, is always, and we're going slightly away from Harry Arter, but it's to make a relevant point. Wes has always been a bit of a kind of a mystery figure in terms of his career, because successive managers, not just internationally, even though our international managers get hammered regularly over it's happened all the time. Yeah. The only thing is that I think people had doubts about his physicality, literally that he would stand up to the battle and that you could always get 90 minutes week on week out of him. But look, for what he gave us, I mean, we all know how good he was, but he's gone, and it's certainly going to be the case now. Robbie Brady, when he gets back fit, you want to see him getting back. It's almost going back to where he was Euro 2016 and kicking on from there. Yeah. Hendrick the same, and Arter, if they can introduce that level of dynamism and stay fit, really important, because, and Declan Rice is the other we mentioned, but it's really vital now. James McCarthy to come back from a really bad injury blow. And I know you rate James McCarthy really.
I do,
really
but I've been waiting him for a number of years for him to come on.
There's been a bit of that in a more compressed level thing with Harry Arter. Everyone's waiting. Have we seen their full potential? Have we seen them really blossom in an Irish shirt? And for this next campaign to be successful, those kind of midfield players, the ones that they all need to bring the qualities they have to the maximum. And do it consistently. It's very important. Yeah, I agree. And if they're doing it at their club and getting played regularly and playing in the Premiership, obviously that helps.
Well, he's certainly gone down well in Cardiff, and he's going to, you'd imagine, be a key player for them. We've just seen here Cardiff City fans just fell in love with Harry Arter as a new culture emerges against Newcastle United. Again, what will endear him to fans over there will be that work rate. Harry Arter is my daughter's name. She's born in October. I love him. Okay, a little bit too much for me, that one. Harry Arter is exactly what Cardiff have been missing. I would absolutely agree with that. I haven't seen them quite a bit last year. So, moving on from Harry Arter towards Irish players, a couple that I want to mention didn't get time last week. Ryan Manning on loan at Rotherham, player who was on loan at Portsmouth last year. He's on loan QPR. Gone to Rotherham. It's going to be a tough year for him in the Championship, but again, outgaining game time, very, very important. The age he is. The other player who I really wanted to talk about last week in particular was Ronan Curtis. Now, he's a player who left Derry City. I know you've seen a little bit of him, more than me, I would suggest. Started very, very well for Portsmouth. Rave reviews in a team that's won 4 out of 4, second in League One. Is he a player that you liked when he was in League One?
Funny enough, I saw the goal he got the other night. Also, he gave away a penalty early on. Where
I wasn't going to mention that.
Yeah, but it's just but you know what's really good? Like, there's in the game a terrible kind of thing to happen to a guy making his way in English football now, and it didn't seem to take a feather out of him. He's up the other end, and he took his goal really well because it was determination and skill and all that. Look, it's really encouraging to see. I know Graham Burke is another name we've down there as well, and whether Curtis, Manning, these guys, I doubt they'll be in the next squad. Maybe Martin will bring them in to have a look at them. He could do that for the friendlies as well.
Curtis in particular, he's putting himself in that he's shown that last year with Darragh Lenihan and Derek Williams that he picked players that were playing well in League One, because that's where we are now.
Well,
so if he's ripping it up there, first of all, he may well get a good move, but Portsmouth won't be too happy to hear from that. But it's a position where not exactly inundated with options. Graham Burke, you've already mentioned, you've seen a lot more of him at Rovers.
Do you know what impressed me about him? The goal he scored the other day, what was really impressive and what entirely fitted in with what I saw of him at Rovers and what Rovers people who'd see him all the time said. Confidence. He's cocky actually, which in a good way.
In a good way, because he's got the work ethic as well with it.
And the thing with him is just the way he took that, for people who didn't see it, the ball broke from across the box. First time, side foot volley into the net. Now, if you're not confident, first of all, you're going to take a touch. Yeah. And if you take a touch, the chance might go. If you're not concentrated and you're not composed, that goes over the bar. Yeah. It was a
week
great
before.
Finish.
He had a goal where he could have taken it first time on his weaker right foot, coming across 6-yard box-ish. Defender came in, let the defender slide away, took it inside with his right foot, just lifted it in his left. He's a player that is playing on real confidence.
Yeah, and the thing is, he at Rovers, he became like a hero at the club, and the reason he made his mark more than anything else around the league was just he scores sensational goals, So he's not an out-and-out striker, but he's a guy who can play anywhere.
No, I don't think he is. I think he fits one of those positions in and around the strike, even against the USA. I was commentating on that game in the summer. If ever there was a player, and I've always said this to young players that get an opportunity, wherever it is, Ireland, club, whatever, impact the game.
Yeah.
So if you're an attacking player and you're under the cosh, you still have to impact the game. He left nothing out there. He was everywhere, showed a huge hunger to impact that game.
Yeah.
And look, he wasn't amazing, but he fitted in really well to anything we did do well.
Yeah.
But his insatiable appetite.
He made sure he got his goal.
Exactly.
It's great because it was a headline, but he's a confident guy. He's got a bit of X factor, wow factor about him, and it's great. Look, like all these guys who go over, you don't want to start heaping too much pressure. Inevitably, we're going to talk about them, and for good reasons, because they're catching our attention, and that's really positive. But it's not necessarily a smooth path, Well, and you sort of look at Daryl Horgan, who went over, best player in the league at the time, explosively exciting player.
It just shows it's not easy, Liam.
And looked like he could hit the ground running at Preston, but then you get a change of manager. He's off to going up to Scotland now to try and hopefully he will. He's a quality player. It's tough though. Yeah. It's tough, and you just hope. What I think Ireland want more than anything else now is someone to really come through and get up to one of the big clubs. Obviously Seamus Coleman up there is probably the highest achieving Irish player in the Premier League, probably. We just need someone. Maybe it'll be Burke, maybe it'll be Curtis, maybe it'll be, but it's early days for those
right
guys.
Down the other end of the spectrum, the youngest, Gavin Bazuna at Shamrock Rovers. We'll talk about different paths, how to get there. We've seen League of Ireland players. Graham Burke obviously went across as an apprentice, a scholar, to Aston Villa, came back, had to reinvent himself and then goes across. We've seen that route. We've seen the traditional going at 16 and staying there. Yeah. But this lad, who really has shot to fame over the last few months with some eye-catching performances in Europe, penalty saves.
Exactly.
And again, it just shows, I suppose, from if we take him out of the equation and just talk Shamrock Rovers for a second, Stephen Bradley would be under a little bit of pressure, a lot of pressure depending on who you listen to and where they are in the league, how far they are off the top two. But if you look at the model of what they're trying to do as a football club, Graham Burke went for decent money. This lad,
400 grand or something.
Plus, yeah. So enticing young players into an environment where they're going to flourish. Look, you don't need to go to England at the age of 15, 16. Get your leaving cert, which Gavin Bazuna is going to do, and then you'll go afterwards. You've got that under your belt a little bit. I suppose from their point of view, it's the fruits of their labour starting to come to fruition.
Yeah, no, look, there's two things I'd say to it. One is what they're clearly doing in terms of the academy. And I was out there for the launch of their new pitches out in Roadstone. Brilliant. And
I've been there, it's impressive, isn't it?
The way to go. And they've got really good coaches. Damien Duff's involved. Good coaches with all the underage teams. So you're looking there at really good long-term planning, which is something like we want to see in League of Ireland clubs and which will benefit Irish football in the long run. The problem, of course, and it shouldn't be either or, but for fans, it often is that they go, great, we've sold Graham Burke. We lost Graham Burke. He was a key player for us. Look where we are now in the league. We're out of the cup, first round, Drogheda. We're beaten by Bows again. Yeah. They haven't beaten Bows all season. 3 wins and a draw. That's why Stephen Bradley's under pressure. So it's a difficult act for any club to keep those balls in the air in a way that satisfies everyone. I mean, you can build from the bottom up. Great. There also has to be an element of top down that works in terms of success, and that's why there's pressure there. I certainly applaud everything they're doing at the underage level, but they're in a difficult situation because they need their team doing well. The supporters want to see them do well. Irish football needs Rovers doing well. It always helps. It's not happening for them there at the moment. So that it's a tough place to be in some ways, but it's certainly in terms of the bigger picture and the long haul, that's very encouraging.
I certainly think so.
And it's great to see a fellow who's going to stay and do his leaving. I know.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
But it is, like, it is important.
Then it just goes back to them. It's not, when I've said this before, 20 years ago when I went, 22 years ago, it's like, you had to go. You had the opportunities there. Now they don't have to. Now they've got options. It's a competitive level, and there's good facilities, better facilities, and they're getting good coaching at a lot of these clubs now where they go away, they're a little bit more mature. And
you mean in the League of Ireland?
Yeah.
And look, it's interesting because Cork, and very quickly touching this, but Cork City and Dundalk both gone out of Europe, and on the back of heavy aggregate defeats, there was another kind of like, where have we gone wrong with the league? Have we regressed and so on? I mean, there's issues to be addressed. I actually think, from just observing the League of Ireland over years, I think there's an awful lot of quality actually in the coaching, in the way teams are playing. And that's not to say there aren't huge problems with teams that struggle, clubs
financially, etc.
But I'm just interested in your view. I actually, and it seems to me that quality that's there is reflected in how many League of Ireland players, albeit via clubs in England, are now in making up the squad, the Irish squad. It certainly seems to be a really good springboard, and I agree with you. If they can keep them here that bit longer before they go over.
A bit more mature, a bit more ready for the move, because it's not one cap fits all. I want to chat James McLean. Broke this morning, a little bit of a row, and it's been in the Stoke Sentinel. It's been all over the papers this morning. Stoke have started really, really poorly in the Championship. Gary Rowett's taken over. Gary Rowett tried to sign James actually for Derby County last season. It was well documented he couldn't leave. James clearly felt a new challenge was needed away from West Brom. So, firstly, Stoke. This has been coming for a number of years. I would have covered a lot of their games in the last few years while Mark Hughes was the manager. Change in ethos, change in philosophy, change in style from
the Pulis
Bowl, which was very, very effective. Fans become a little bit, we finished 9th, we finished 10th, but we're playing this way. We want to play like Barcelona. In comes the new signings in Mbula, Kevin Wimmer, Wilfred Boney, huge money, Berahino. It's been a disaster. It's been an absolute disaster. And I'll tell you, when I get collected from Stoke and I go back to the airport to fly home, and you walk, I get the taxi driver to park about a mile away, and you go around the stadium, down by the canal, and you walk around, you're just shuffling because there's hundreds and hundreds of people. And you hear all the chit-chat from the fans. And this is what I've had for the last 2 years. They've hated it. Absolutely hated it. So Gary Rowett comes in, completely overhauls the squad, gets rid of who he thinks aren't going to be the right type of characters for the dressing room. But last night, 3-0 at home to Wigan, promoted from League One. And James McLean, massive argument by all accounts with Jack Butland, who came out and had a bit of a pop at him during the game. By the way, he hasn't covered himself in glory. He was lucky to make the plane going to the World Cup. Never mind, he should be England's number one. First game of the season against Leeds. Made a howler, should have saved it. Last season, much hyped young English goalkeeper, didn't back it up. And what we've said about James McLean, because let's be honest, we don't care too much about Stoke City. It's all about James McLean and Ireland. From our perspective.
No, absolutely.
Great, he's playing football, but we'd like him to be playing in a better team that's playing well.
I mean, look,
it just typifies his personality, doesn't it? The fact that he wants it. He's willing to have that argument, have it out, because they're getting spanked by Wigan. What's your take on it?
Well, I think you know, you often hear people saying, well, this player A wouldn't be the player he is if he didn't have that part of his personality, you know. And you kind of think, well, yeah, but like you also would rather see players making headlines for
the right reasons,
bombing up the wing and whipping crosses in and scoring goals. Now, to be fair to James McLean, like he'd been amazing. Campaign for us.
Did, yeah.
Amazing. I mean, I remember Martin O'Neill saying if John Walters was the talisman from the Euro campaign, McLean would become the talisman,
agree.
you know.
Yep.
And he got a couple of really important goals and the Irish fans respond to that passion. But we also know there's a bit of another side to him as well. You know, I remember there was a game that was last season and somebody had a nibble at him and James just turned around and you could just see what was coming next. He's just he cannot disguise it when he's going after someone, you know. You know he's going to put this guy into the stand. But and so that's part of what he is. Look, to be fair to him, what's come out this morning, we only know the bare bones. Yeah. I think it's fair to say there did seem to be a suggestion, as you kind of alluded to, that he was reacting to something that the keeper said. So how provocative that might have been, or I don't know. You know,
that's not nice though, Liam. I've played with players before, right, where they play to the crowd.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Or this type of nonsense where you know, like someone gives the ball away and their arms in the air.
Yeah.
Wasn't me type crap, or when a player, for instance, if you've played with a right back and you're a holding midfielder, and you know this obsession now with fullbacks playing high and wide. I think some of them play high wide and hide and go seek because they don't actually give you the option of coming to get on the ball. Give the ball away and the arms in the air playing to the crowd. So by hearing little bits and bobs, maybe that's what happened with Jack Butland.
Sure. So would it have been different if it had all been not even in the tunnel but in the dressing room or something, which I'm sure you've seen public, plenty of
25,000-30,000 people there looking at this, and they look at Jack Butland's arms in the air and they instantly think, oh, he's right, James McLean, what are you doing? Or
and the other thing as well is what would be kind of slightly worrying from James' point of view, though he's clearly a strong character. He's had to deal with a fair amount of abuse, and not just from rival supporters, from his own supporters and people over the Poppy issue and all that, where he took a totally principled stand and explained himself in a really articulate way. But still, there's a bit of you give a dog a bad name, and you're kind of worried that this is just another of those little things that suddenly gives ammunition to Stoke fans who are now obviously disgruntled at the start of the season to sort of see him as the scapegoat, never mind rival fans. So, you know, you hope that's not the case. I hope Rowd's able to resolve it, and from James McLean's point of view, you just want to see him playing regularly in a decent side that's getting results so that his confidence is up. But I still think when he comes into the Irish setup, we touched on this earlier, that's his club.
That's it, bang.
You know, that's his home. That's his home, and there's clearly nothing that inspires him more than pulling on the green shirt. So I would imagine that will continue to be the case. But equally, for a guy who, remember, came into the picture on the eve of Euro 2012, remember he was, you know, a late selection.
He was young, wasn't he? He was full
such a story. The impact he made at Sunderland, absolutely explosive, and he's done so, as we said, as recently as the last international campaign, became a huge player for Ireland. You just don't want him to get to a stage now where it's a downward trajectory. And at the moment, and we're only a couple of games into the season, like you're thinking, well, the table says you should have stayed at West Brom. But listen, that
feels
could
like you
change.
needed that change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, you've mentioned it. Comes back in September for our games. He's one of the first names on the team sheet.
But it would help, as you well know, Keith, if he's not being a scapegoat at his club, if he's enjoying plenty of football and they're getting a few results. We need McLean giving Ireland what he can give us, which is that, you know, incredible power up the line, the ability to whip things in, and an eye for goal, and the tackles. But we'll see how this pans out. I'm kind of slightly loath to say too much about it, given we've only had the bare bones. But as you say, some of it was played out in public, and the manager has confirmed it. So it's not the start of the season he wanted.
That he would have wanted.
Clearly,
But listen, we've ran a little bit over.
Have we? Okay.
Thanks for your time. I
That's
really
me
appreciate it.
waffling too much.
No, it's nice having you in and back in again in the next few weeks, hopefully. Again.
Okay, love to do it. Yeah, great. Thanks, Keith.
So that's all we've got time for this week. You can share the show or watch it back on YouTube or listen wherever you get your Off the Ball podcast. I'll be back again next Thursday. Until then, take it easy.